This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Wednesday. It's July 26th, 2023. Thank you for joining us. I want to start by showing a video today. This video is not produced by the Trump campaign, although it looks like it is. I mean, it has the feel of it, and it's some organization supporting Trump, but I think it's a very, very effective ad, and I want everybody to see it. So, Chris, let's go ahead and play it.
If I was the deep state and I wanted to destroy America, I would rig the election with a puppet candidate, one that was so compromised that they would never say a word about it. I would create a false flag that allows for mail-in ballots. I would be in charge of the ballot counting machines. I would create a false flag to blame all who question the results of the election. If I was the deep state, I would prosecute anyone that went against me. I would sue and prosecute anyone that spoke up about the fraudulent election. I would use my powers to shut down all your internet businesses and bankrupt you. If I was the deep state, I would make everyone an example why you should never question a Democrat ever winning an election. I would imprison my foes. I would use my corrupt DAs and blackmail judges to destroy you. I would make sure all crimes I ever committed never happened. I would prosecute my biggest competition. I would make sure they could never run for office ever again. If I was the deep state, I would convince everyone that Ukraine Nazis were good and women are men. If I was the deep state, I would own every politician that mattered. If I was the deep state, I would push my pedophilia ambitions on you. If I was the deep state, you'd question your sexual identity but not the medical establishment. If I was the deep state, you would fear to ever resist me. If I was the deep state, you would wish I was really the devil. If I was the deep state, I would say mission accomplished.
Now, that's very effective. Chris, what do you think of that? Why don't you come on for a minute? We'll talk about it. I think it's extremely effective. It's not a Trump ad. It looks like one, but it is. This deep state message is one I've been on. I wrote Killing the Deep State a few years ago, and did very, very well. What do you think, Chris?
It sounds about right. You manipulate and you gaslight the population into believing everything you tell them. It seems plausible every single time. But if you peel back the layers, and we're in a society, by the way, where everything is on the surface and people believe anything they see on the surface, there's no desire for many to peel off the top layer. The superficial news is what it is. This is why people scroll down their Facebook or Twitter feeds, see the headlines, and believe immediately those particular two lines, and they'll just retweet, spout it out, or throw it in conversation at the family dinner table, possibly at work.
Well, I think this is the truth central, and I think that's what's happening is people are finally demanding the truth. I'll get you back here in a minute, Chris. Let's go to the next story. The first story I want to cover is this Biden story. I think finally I think the gig is up for Biden. I think that the Democrats and Republicans both want to get rid of him. Jonathan Turley's got a very, very good article out today. And Jonathan Turley is a law professor at George Washington University in Washington. And he is writing this editorial. It was published in the Post. Professor at George Washington University Law School. He's an attorney. You see him on television. He's been up many times talking about Trump, etc. But this column is saying there's nothing to see here. That's the Baghdad Bob line. Nothing to see here when everything is behind him, his tanks moving and everything else. I guess he picked it up also from a movie by Leslie Nielsen, The Naked Gun, where every chaos going on behind him, and he says there's nothing to see here. There's an apocalyptic scene of fire and destruction. So his column is that the question here is that Devon Archer is going to give testimony. He canceled the other day, but he's going to give testimony about Biden being involved, Joe Biden, and with his son, and coming to meetings to arrange business deals. And one of the members who ventured into the allegations here, that was Dan Goodman. The results were disastrous for the Democrats. That when the Democrats raise these issues, the Democrats are pounced upon. But I think the country is now, enough has come out. It's enough drip, drip, drip on the Bidens. Hunter Biden is disgusting. We've had plenty of information about the Biden family. And with Trump going to face indictment and all the rest of it, Trump's numbers only increase. I saw another clip, and I don't know if we can grab it, but it was on the it was a clip with Brett Baer, and he was talking about how none of the candidates like Ron DeSantis are catching on. Trump is the only one who's catching on. DeSantis, I guess, fired about a third of his staff yesterday, and Fox News is panicking because they have just abandoned their whole Trump audience, and they're tanking. They're going the way of Budweiser. I think the American people have had it. I think the American people are on the verge of saying, we're done with this corruption. We went back in America. Harry Truman, when he left the presidency, went back to Independence, Missouri, where he was from, and lived in the house he had lived in before he was involved in politics. This was his family house, not a big deal. In the 50s, you could drive by and see him on the porch in his rocking chair in the summer. This was the America I grew up in. It's America that fought World War I and fought World War II. Probably two wars would have been better if we could have avoided them. The changes that have occurred in the country, moving us into a new century, which we have now done, and we're just beginning to figure this out in terms of how a global world really works. But the values of human beings have not changed. And if you have a globalist society that is open to a few oligarchs making billions of dollars corruptly, passing money around, Ukraine, it was another story yesterday. I saw that one of Zelensky's top aides had been in on a deal with Biden, and they've got blackmail material on Biden, which is why Biden has been supporting all this money going over to Ukraine. And the Russian army is just decimating the Ukrainians right now, because the Ukrainian army they don't have training. They have equipment, but they don't know how to run it. The Russians are in deep defensive positions, minefields, they're well secured, and Russia's in control of the situation. Russia's not going to lose in Ukraine. The only people making money on this are the arms dealers, and they're making a fortune. Now, when you look at what Devin Archer, who has been in prison, he went to prison for a while. He is this whole corrupt bunch, taking money from Russia, taking money, which they did, taking money from China, taking money from Ukraine. The Bidens have 20 or 30 of these fake companies in which they launder money. These people should all be in federal prison. They certainly shouldn't be in the White House. Chris, you want to comment?
Well, they really shouldn't be in the White House. The problem is there was, and you saw in the video earlier today, there are people that wanted to oust the previous administration for his promises to expose corruption, and I'll use the term "drain the swamp." I mean, he kind of let out a couple of leaks here and there, didn't do the whole thing. We understand that, but you're looking at the idea that the Washington establishment needed to get their guys back in by any means possible. That's what they're doing now. And at this point, they're trying to convince us that these are the right guys to be here.
Well,
don't look at the evidence that Comer's presenting here. Yeah, right.
What I want to do is move the entire bureaucracy to Death Valley.
Yeah, Death Valley is
a whole bunch of them there, and they can have all the solar and wind they want. They can have all the solar equipment. They can have all the winds. We'll ship them all there. They can have a field day.
With the defense being run by the media, it used to be they tried to pretend they were objective. At this point, they're blatantly running defense for Joe Biden. Well, it started with the fake stutter claims and moved on forward.
It's disgusting. I mean, I've turned off I don't watch. The only thing I watch on television anymore now is baseball in the summer. I mean, it's ridiculous to watch
Even
the
that's going
news.
south.
Well, no, I think they actually improved the game, so I like baseball still. At any rate, look, let's go to the next story. The Democrats are running crime-ridden cities all across the country. These are cities that are just a picture of Detroit. And Detroit has been, the poster child for a failed city. Well, they said now the Democrats are running failed cities all over the country and lying about the crime statistics. So this is this story is covered by Zero Hedge this morning. Essentially, the FBI officially switched data collection methods from the Uniform Crime Reporting Database to the National Incident-Based Reporting System just before Biden entered the White House. This requires agencies to submit more detailed reports. The transition's been slow, and only 63% of law enforcement agencies are really supplying this data yet. So there's not complete data. And something like San Francisco doesn't plan to release any data until after the election, 2024. They don't want to tell people how much crime there is. The Democrats want to hide it. Now, just go into a city, go to San Francisco, go into New York City. They're not as safe as they were. And San Francisco is now a drug city where the police are not enforcing the laws. So drug dealers come openly because it's a good opportunity to do business in the open. And crime in the cities have escalated dramatically since Black Lives Matter began burning down the cities, and nobody did anything about it. So if you look at the data of the 20 most violent places in the United States, including homicides, non-negligent manslaughter, aggravated assault, rape, and robbery, of the 20 top ones, most violent places in the U.S., 17 are controlled by Democrats, and they include these cities: Chicago, Minneapolis, New Orleans, Lansing, Michigan, Nashville, Anchorage, Alaska, San Bernardino, Oakland, Indianapolis, Springfield, Missouri, Albuquerque. I used to live in Albuquerque for many years ago. Stockton, Rockford, Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland. Milwaukee, Little Rock, Memphis, Baltimore, Detroit, and St. Louis. All Democratic cities. Okay, so I think people are catching on. They're beginning to realize that these Democratic hellholes, Democrats can't run these cities. San Francisco does not plan to provide full and complete or accurate crime reports to the FBI until 2025. They're going to withhold crime stats until after the 2024 elections. When a country is run by criminals, we can't expect justice. There is no Justice Department. The Justice Department is completely out of control. American people have no trust in it whatsoever. Why should they? If you're a Democrat, you can do anything you want. Let's deal with some reality. And years ago, 2011, whatever it was, I caught HSBC, the bank, laundering money. One of the bankers from HSBC from Long Island came to me with data showing me the accounts that they were opening up. To use your credit card, your Social Security number, they'd open up an account, and HSBC would run millions of dollars into that account. And then they'd close the account, and the money went into the account and it went right out of the account. It was laundering the money. Now, I published articles in it. I was writing on WorldNet Daily at the time. And the Department of Homeland Security contacted me. The Senate Permanent Investigating contacted me. I gave them all the data. And finally, HSBC was fined over $1 billion, a huge fine. But nobody went to jail. Now, you can't run the drug business without a bank. I've said this repeatedly. You can't drive around semi-trailers full of cash, $100 bills. And they're planning to get rid of cash, but they're not planning to get rid of drugs because the government runs the drug deal. CIA has been in the drug business since World War II, when it was the OSS. They were in with Chiang Kai-shek and the communist Chinese in Southeast Asia, and they were running drugs. They ran drugs in the CIA during the Vietnam War. Douglas Valentine has written books on it. It's documented. CIA's in the drug trade. It's cash off the books. You have intelligence agencies, the law enforcement agencies know there's huge amounts of fentanyl coming across the border. They know who the cartels are. Nothing is done. Why? There's too much money involved. All the politicians, all the law enforcement agencies, when you get a society that is this corrupt, the entire, federal government ought to be moved to Death Valley. That'd be a start. But it comes down even more basically to our schools, our families, and comes back to getting God back into the world. I'm going to do something on that in a minute. I'm going to read something, but first I want to do a couple more stories. So, Chris, let's go to the story here. We've got two stories on the environment, and I'm going to reach back and get a couple of books here that I want to highlight. But first one is that the solar panels, there's a study being done right now. It's being done by a group that is looking into how much carbon involved in producing these solar panels. It's a group called Environmental Progress. It's a nonprofit research organization. And what they're saying is they're point to gaping oversight. The problem is oversight. The figures influencing the government, net zero policies, and investments in solar worldwide are compiled and collated to the difficulty of getting accurate information. We can't get accurate information out of China. China won't tell you how much carbon, how much hydrocarbon fuel is put into getting the solar panels materials together. So the rare earth minerals, all this has been lied about. So the IPCC claims that these solar panels, photovoltaic panels, do not take very much carbon or release carbon dioxide to produce, but between the figures and the accurate figures are 5 to 6 times higher than are being reported. Course of a 4-month investigation, Environmental Progress has confirmed that EcoInvent, perhaps the world's largest database on the entire environmental impact of renewables, has no data from China about its photovoltaic industry. Meanwhile, the ultimate source of the International Energy Agency's supposedly public data on photovoltaic carbon intensity is confidential, and the data is therefore unverifiable. Much of the cradle-to-grave carbon intensity data that the governments depend on to guide photovoltaic arrays are instead based on modeling assumptions that are likely to have grossly underestimated, if not just made up, solar carbon emissions because they cannot get insights from Chinese manufacturers. Now, again, this is part of the problem I've been pointing out, that the data is fake. The data and economic data on inflation is not accurate. John Williams, who writes Shadow Stats, and he's just redoing his site right now, John Williams says that the real unemployment number right now is more like 22%, but it's not being reported because the government rigs how the data is collected. The number of people who out of the workforce, working age but out of the workforce, is probably over 100 million. Now, these are numbers that should be alarming, and that's why they're not reported. I'm looking at the Shadow Stats right now and seeing what he's talking about. The headlines for the last 2 weeks. In the current headlines, an assessment of the July 20th National Association of Realtors reporting on June 2023 existing home sales shows a continuing pattern of annual declines, down by almost 20%, 18.9% year to year, down for the 22nd straight month. That reporting followed a day headline annual declines in June 2023. Building permits were down, housing starts were down 15 to 20%. Okay, now you're not getting that information. July, on the inflation front, The July 13 release of the June 2023 Producer Price Index, the PPI, showed annual inflation eased 0.1% from 0.9%, from 9% in May, from 0.9%, suggesting that, okay, so what he's really saying, however, is when you look at the real inflation numbers, they're more still like over 10%. And just goes down. The money supply, what we've been doing in the country is printing money. And we've been not accurately reporting the economic statistics of housing starts, unemployment, the number of people out of work, the number of homeless, the number of crimes. The data doesn't exist anymore. What exists is the lying you're told by the mainstream media. Nothing to see here. Turn on Bret Baier. Bret Baier, I've had some run-ins with Bret Baier over the years. These people are well paid to give the government corporate line. They're propaganda artists. They're not going to report, and Murdoch's not going to put anything on that station that threatens the current narratives. Now, people are beginning to recognize this. The Obama story about the chef that drowned has changed. Pictures have been produced. The guy did take swimming lessons. He knew how to swim. The Obamas were home. They were not gone the day he died. That story has still not been explained, and it probably won't be. LeBron James's son, who was a young guy, collapsed in a basketball court with a heart attack. LeBron James is one of the biggest supporters of the government vaccines. Again, the number of deaths resulting from the vaccines has not been reported and is not going to get reported. And the people who try to do it get canceled, get removed still off of Twitter, get removed, won't get any news coverage. These stories can't be told. We're living in this age of disinformation. Now, the climate issues have bothered me the most because this whole narrative, and Christopher will show my book on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. I'm basically trying to get people to understand that hydrocarbon fuels are not dangerous. Hydrocarbon is not the major source in this world of the heat of the earth. It is the sun. Go outside, people. That yellow thing up in the sky is not a tree ornament. It's the sun. And at nighttime, I've got news for the Democrats, it's dark because the sun isn't in the sky. Earth rotates. Sun is on the other half of the earth. That's why we have time zone changes. These are hard concepts. They don't expect people who have been taught diversity in school, that's all they know. They can tell you what gender they are or make up their gender, but they can't tell you anything about how climate works or how the earth works or anything about math or science. It's complete nonsense that carbon dioxide it's a minor, it's a trace molecule in the atmosphere, 0.04%. But when we can't get accurate statistics, when all we're told is lies, and I've covered this Judith Curry, who is a climate scientist who abandoned the universities when she found out ClimateGate, the scientists were lying. Now, I'm going to pick a book here in a minute and read it, but I want to cover the last story first. Oh, by the way, show the second book. The second book is in print, Chris. So show the second book, please. This one is the first, and this is coming out. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon. It's going to be about a 400-page book. It's the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. And what I'm showing is how the Marxism didn't work. Workers of the world did not revolt in 1848. Labor unions were formed. Workers got better conditions. What happened was Marxism changed. They decided with Gramsci, who was an Italian communist, the World War I epic era, he decided that we have to attack the culture of capitalism. That got picked up by the Frankfurt School. They attacked the culture. And Marcuse, who was a German communist, came to the United States, lived very comfortably in California, started attacking the United States, wrote books that were very popular in the 60s, Eros and Civilization. he argued that liberation would only come from, and anything you can imagine. This was their solution to utopia. And of course, the 60s with sex, drug, and rock and roll, it sold pretty well. You can't run a civilization on wild, uninhibited sex. And the get away from God's law that sex is not dealing with procreation, which is what it was intended to do, is a society that's gone awry. Okay, now this book will show postmodernism, which was the idea that there's only subjective reality. We perceive the world through our senses. There's no objective reality. There's no natural laws. There's no absolute truth and falsity. So just make it up. That's why you get the transgenderism, because they believe they can construct their reality. It's John Lennon's Imagine. Let's imagine a world without police. Okay, imagine it all you want. It's Detroit. It's San Francisco. That's what you get. Don't imagine that you're going to have all of these criminals singing Kumbaya and in a flower dance, in one of the city parks. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to rape. They're going to murder. They're going to steal. They're going to kill, and you're not going to be able to have anybody to stop them, because if they get arrested, they'll get released. The criminals have more rights right now. The Democrats are so confused about what's right and wrong that the criminals are the ones who are getting all the rights. Even the police are criminal this day, and the FBI. Again, local police may be different, but I'm telling you, the culture right now is moving in a direction where the criminals are in control. We want to live in a society where the criminals are in control. It'll be anarchy. That's that point of that book, is that communism only destroys. It's negative. Cannot create. It's a lie. God created this world. He created it in a way that it works if we follow the laws. But if we don't, it's chaos. And right now we've got chaos. Now, I'm going to pick a couple of books from behind me for a minute and read a couple of sentences. Chris, you want to comment while I do this? I'm going to reach back and get a couple of books.
Oh, it's funny you talk about these cities all over the country that are being run into the ground. I hear a lot of arguments on social media. The left tries to say, well, the right has the concentration of crime because look at all the red states, and it was welfare too. Look at all the red states and all these poor red states. They have a high concentration of welfare and problems. The thing is, though, the blue cities, the Democrat cities within those states, have a high concentration of urban blight and welfare as compared to the sparsely populated rural sections which dominate those states. That skews the stats.
It also skews the voting.
Exactly.
And if you can't have free elections, if you can't have elections where they're legitimate, this is one of my current good books. These are the guys who are going to run the world. Now, you want that guy being your president? Okay.
I don't want him singing for my band.
Okay. This is the grip of culture. This is a book with saying that the climate change movement has become a secular religion. It's a secular religion, and you can't disagree with it or you'll be canceled. Okay, another book here. This one I'm just getting into now, which is the Unpopular Truth, and the subtitle is about electricity and the future of energy. Okay, and it's written by two authors, two professors, with names I can't pronounce probably correctly, but it's Schernikau, Schernikau, is Professor Lars Schernikau, and this guy William Smith. I can pronounce his name.
There you go.
Okay, and what the book shows is that hydrocarbon fuels work, and their power. They work for several reasons. These are not hard concepts. Of course, they are hard concepts if you go to a public school or if you go to a university anywhere in the United States. Number one, just take oil, natural gas. Okay, so you have to refine them, but then you can store them in a tank. When you want to use them, you run them through, combust them, put them through an engine and combust them. Now you've got energy. Now let's talk about wind and solar. Well, wind and solar is fleeting. It's not all the time. It's intermittent. At nighttime, there's no sun in the sky. Newsflash to the climate change people. No sun in the sky at night. It's dark. Your photovoltaic panels don't work because it's dark. That tree ornament is not shining in the sky. Hard concept. Okay, now because it's intermittent, means you got to store the energy if you wanted to use solar at night, solar power at night. Okay, so the point is, with the wind and solar, they're intermittent. Rare minerals in order to store the electricity. And because it's stored, you lose some of the power storing it and taking it out of storage. These are fundamental issues. The wind doesn't blow all the time. And there's no way that problem is going to be solved. You know, these are fundamental limitations. What they're pointing out is that these hydrocarbon fuels are more powerful when they are combusted. Okay, Chris, let's do the last story. That's the book, and I'm going to start writing about this book because I'm enjoying it. I like the idea that it's true. The truth, we're getting some truth again. Okay, the last story I wanted to cover is this one about the electric cars, electric vehicles, which is not surprising, but they also don't work in the cold and they don't work in the heat. They don't have the endurance. We're finding in this summer, which is hot, and not because of global warming, that these vehicles are suboptimal in cold weather, and they have major difficulties in the scorching hot temperatures. Okay, so they're getting data that say that the range, they impact the range that they can drive, the relationship between batteries and their range. That a temperature over 100 degrees, ranges of these diminish. Same problem out batteries. You can't do this stuff. Batteries are efficient. Don't have a battery the size of a flashlight battery, small battery that would power a city with wind. It doesn't work. So the cold weather decreased the range of these EVs by 17 to 20%, and the hot weather is doing the same. The worst declines were a couple of the Chevy 32% decline. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is it's Wednesday, July 26, 2023. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. These problems look dark. They look insurmountable. But God doesn't give us something we can't handle. What it requires is, I think, the first step has got to be for us to understand the requirements of 2 Chronicles 7:14, which is we get down on our knees, and I'm asking you to join me in getting down on my knees, that ask God's forgiveness that we let this country get to this point. We let God be taken out of our schools. We allowed abortion to run wild and kill millions of babies. We let the Democrats ruin our cities. The communists have taken over the media. The Democratic Party has become a communist party, virtually a neo-Marxist party. We have to get back to God. We have to get back to the family. We have to get back to values that matter. Otherwise, it is going to be anarchy. We've got to get back to truth. That's why this is the Truth Central. Because if we don't have truth, if we don't have truth in our statistics, in our reporting, in our understanding of what's going on in world circumstances, then we are lost. It's got to start with the truth. Word and God bless. Thank you very much.